All right, welcome everybody. So I'm gonna here to tell a little story and do a little dirty rant because back in 2025, a little game came out called Blueprints, and when I first heard about it from my friends, so they were all, I because I'm fairly out of touch with video game news, despite being a video game enthusiast. I rely on my friends heavily to tell me about the cool games, and they would tell me about this game, and they would say, usually follow it with, "Really, Manda? Wait, you haven't played it? You haven't played it? You, Manda, haven't played it?" Um, they know me well, and this was their subtle way of telling me that maybe I might enjoy this game. So I looked up a little bit on it, and it was the story. So Blueprints is the story of a man named Herbert who has lost or who has passed away and has left his inheritance to you, the player character, also inheritance, of course. In order to inherit his mansion and his fortune, what you need to do is you need to find a secret room in his 45 room estate, the 46th room, if you will. And if you don't, well, then the inheritance is lost. But of course, there's another catch even to that. You see, this estate has some magical, well, qualities to it, and every night the mansion basically resets, and you have to rebuild it from scratch. And to do so, you are subject to drafting rooms at random to try and find this 46th room. That's the basic concept of the game. I was told it's a roguelike game. I was told it's a puzzle game. I was told even on one occasion that it's a walking simulator. It is all three of those things. So I picked up the game. I thought, okay, everybody really wants me to play it. I started on day one and I walked into it fairly blind, right? I walked into it not knowing a ton. I looked up the very basic information, but otherwise, I had no idea what I was in for. And I also walked into it with a healthy amount of skepticism because, well, I have been overhyped on things before and I have been burned from that overhype before. So I thought, you know what, I'm sure it's fine. And I played day one and I thought, you know what? Yeah, this game is cute. I like it. I'm going to keep playing, see where it goes. I'm not seeing any puzzles yet per se, but I am interested in the story. I'm interested in the mystery. I love the vibe of it. I'm enjoying the mechanic of this roguelite thing that's going on. And needless to say, by day 264, I was thoroughly obsessed with this game. And not since Myst, I think. Well, there's only been a few times that I have felt this way about a game as I felt the first time I ever played Myst, which is the other game I am insanely obsessed with. So, um, I was obviously very sad when the game ended, when I finished because I had no more blueprints to play, I had nothing to look forward to. Luckily, though, what I did have was Let's Players. We are in a magical land where we could watch people play games online, and I also had friends who had yet to play the game who would let me watch them, and I got to experience the joy all over again. The joy and also caveat the slight panic. Because you see, I was watching my friends play, and the thing is, I had a lot of problems, especially with the later stage puzzles in the game. I needed a lot of help, a lot of outside help. Now, part of that is because of my patience or lack thereof. I should have probably stuck with it, grinded away a bit more, been patient with myself, and eventually gotten the answers. But the other reason is that after learning the answers, I have no idea how Amanda, would have gotten that solution. And when I'm watching my friends play, it wasn't that they were solving things quickly, but they were solving quite effectively, right? They had all of their theories up and they were solving without external hints. And again, at first I wondered, "Oh gosh, am I stupid? Am I just subpar? Maybe I am. Maybe I just am not as smart as I thought I was. I'm usually not. But do I deserve to live on this planet because I can't play a puzzle video game? Obviously not." Uh, when I reflected a little bit more on my own playthrough and my friend's playthrough, I realized something. In fact, I realized two things. One is that Blueprints is not a single player game. That is theory number 1. And 2, it actually has a lot of influence and a lot of in common with the world of puzzle hunts than it does with puzzle video games. And that is obviously what I would like to talk about today. Apologies as well. I This is the first time I'm running it full, and I didn't realize that Canva would put in all these transitiony things. I would have turned those off. But yes, we are going to be discussing today blueprints, what works about it, what doesn't, and what its influences are, and why I think it is a revolutionary game. So first things first, if you do not know me, hello, my name's Manda. I am a narrative designer. In fact, I consume all things narrative. I will just talk about it endlessly. I will study it endlessly. I am fascinated by how narrative is told in different mediums. I'm also a writer. I am an actor. By day, to make money, I am a fraud investigator, which actually really does factor into, it has a lot of crossover with narrative design. Um, Fly by the seat of my pants. Yes, thanks, Dan. Um, I love mystery stories. I do streams every week playing mystery games. I'm a video game and escape game enthusiast, and I love pie. If you want to win me over, feed me pie. That's a very easy ask. Other things to get out of the way first. So, if you have not played Blueprints, I am not going to go into great detail about all of the puzzles in this game. I would not do that to you. However, I am going to be talking about some aspects of the game which some might consider spoilery. If you have not played this game, normally I would say, turn this off right now. No, don't turn this off. Support the con, watch the con. But maybe cover your ears. And just or close your eyes or whatever. But like, just be warned, I am going to be talking about aspects of the game that not going to try and ruin for you, but which might hint you to certain things, or just, yeah, this is your spoiler warning. Exactly. All right. Before I get further into blueprints, let's talk theory, puzzle theory. Now, caveat, this is not my area of expertise. Like I said, I'm a narrative designer, but I have played a lot of puzzle games. I hang out with puzzle designers. I've learned enough about it to give some 101 things, and there's going to be certain concepts and terms that I'm going to be using that I should introduce here. So let's talk about when do I turn my sound back on? Yeah. Um Let's talk about puzzles in general. I'm going to be talking about two basic types of puzzles from which all other puzzles stem. The first type is an aha puzzle. These are puzzles that involve a flash of inspiration that help you solve it. This is also known as the how to solve stage of puzzle solving. This usually involves some sort of making correlations, doing some lateral thinking, making some leaps in logic. And once you've put like some seemingly disparate clues together, you're usually left thinking, aha, that's what it is. If you happen to learn the answer after the fact, if you're having problems or you're getting hints, um, if you learn what the answer is, a good aha puzzle will make you think, oh, that makes sense. Even if you haven't gotten it yourself, the answer should make sense in retrospect. If you are solving a puzzle and you get an answer and you think like, what? Why is that what? Um, it's not necessarily a indicative of you just not thinking right. It's actually usually a sign of a badly designed puzzle. So those are aha puzzles. They tend to be the more cerebral puzzles. Next to that, we have process puzzles. Yeah, that's Clay. Don't listen to him. Oh no, it's not Clay. Sorry, origami. Sorry, I was looking at colors. Sorry. Sorry, origami. I think, is that for spoilers? I'm not discussing spoilers right now. Uh so you're good to turn volume back on if you like. Sorry about that. Um Process puzzles, on the other hand, these are puzzles where you know what to do, right? And you just need to work your way through them. These solve those puzzles. Jigsaws, you need to put them together. Mazes, you need to get to the center or you need to get out. There's usually little arrows to tell you which way to go at the beginning and the end. You just have to actually work through the process of doing it. This doesn't mean that process puzzles are boring in any way. In fact, you often feel a great sense of accomplishment and satisfaction upon finishing a process puzzle. However, there's a fine line between process and tedium. A well-designed process puzzles knows when it has to stop. There are many process puzzles out there where you're still 10 minutes later, still like working your way through it and thinking, "Oh my god, is this thing gonna end anytime soon?" That's when you know you have a bad process puzzle. Process puzzles are usually also preceded by an aha puzzle. Aha puzzles and process puzzles often work in conjunction with each other. The aha comes when you realize what you have to do or how you could solve it. The process comes and you actually working your way through that. And to the left here, I have a picture from the game Portal. Portal is a very good example of a game with tiny ahas that lead to a lot of process, right? You might realize you need to get to the other side of this room and you don't know how to do it. But the little aha comes in that you can put a portal in the floor and you know you can put it in the ceiling and you realize if you gain enough speed and do things just right, you'll be able to gain enough speed to launch yourself across the room. That's the little aha you have. The process comes in actually putting those portals down, jumping in at the right angle, timing it right, making sure that you like, have launched yourself correctly. That's a good example of like aha followed by process. I hate hearing the term "that was a poorly designed puzzle," because puzzles, you have to think about them in context, and one of those contexts is the medium in which the puzzle exists. You have to think about what you are designing your puzzle for. I have 3 up here. They are not the only puzzle mediums out there, but they're the 3 that I am the most familiar with, so that's what I'm going to discuss. For example, you have your escape room puzzles, right? Escape room puzzles tend to be more process heavy. And that's because process puzzles are much more conducive for groups to play than aha puzzles are. Not that it's impossible, it's just it's kind of more fun, right? It's a bit more fun to be running around with your friends trying to hit buttons in the right order than it is for all of you to be maybe staring at a painting on a wall, thinking in your head silently, wondering, trying to get the aha of what this painting means, right? It's it's doable, but it doesn't lend itself well to escape rooms and group activities, right? They also tend to be on the easier side as well, for two reasons. One of them being time constraints, the other one which I will get to. But yeah, escape rooms, they need to be solved within an hour, right? You cannot afford to have overly complex puzzles in that room. If a puzzle takes more than 5 to 8 minutes to solve, it's too long. It's too complex. There's too many layers. So escape rooms tend to be on the easier side. And in an escape room as well, all information needs to be constrained to that game space. There should be very limited outside knowledge that you need to bring in. If you have Morse code in the room, there should be a book or something in the room that helps you to decipher that Morse code, right? You can't assume that everyone's going to know Morse code. I don't even know. I know 2 people who know Morse code off by heart now, I think. Video games, video games are very varied because they have a whole bunch of genres. Video games, the complexity of puzzles depends on the genre and the mechanics of that video game. Platformers, naturally, more process heavy, right? Platformers, you're moving around and manipulating an environment. It would make sense that your puzzles often involve pushing blocks or, putting something in the right place or like trying to reach a certain area by rappelling off of walls or something. And so, like, yeah, obviously, those are gonna be more process heavy. Zelda games are a good example of, having a lot of platformer, process heavy puzzles. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom actually got a little bit more complex after that, but for the most part, you lean heavily on that. Then you have slower paced games like your Mists and your Querns and your Blue Princes and that kind of thing, which are more aha heavy. These are ones where you might be staring at a screen for an hour, not really doing anything in the game, just kind of taking in the puzzle that's presented before you. Maybe you're taking notes, maybe you're doing this. And then once you get that aha, then you do what's necessary in the game environment. You might like pull the right lever or put the code that you have figured out into the lock, that kind of thing. So those are Those are on the other extreme end of it. Again, though, like escape rooms, with video games, you want all of the information available to solve that puzzle within the game space itself. You cannot assume that outside knowledge should be used in this case. So, and then we have puzzle hunts. Ha 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 ha. So, here's to the meat of it here. Puzzle hunts are an entirely different kind of beast. Puzzle hunts are usually competitive events that occur, sometimes over a day, a weekend, maybe even a week, where teams of people get together and compete to see who can solve a series of very complex puzzles the fastest. Usually should be done in teams. Sometimes, and we'll get to that, sometimes these teams can involve upwards of 100 people, actually, and the puzzles have multiple layers to them. These are very complex puzzles. When I say layers, what do I mean by that? Let's take a look at an example of a puzzle hunt puzzle. Oh yes, and one thing to note here too, the information, unlike escape rooms and video games and other mediums, when it comes to puzzle hunts, there are no limits to what knowledge you can draw from. Google is your best friend. They do not hold your hand. That's the point. They're competitive. So that's why it's good to have teams as well, which we'll get to. When I say multiple layers in a puzzle, here's an example of a puzzle hunt. And now I was gonna considering showing you the whole puzzle, but for this sake, I've summarized it. This was taken from a paper called Introduction to Writing Good Puzzle Hunt Puzzles. It was written in 2014, and unfortunately, I've misplaced the person's name. But let's say you're presented with a short story, and embedded into that story is a puzzle that you have to solve. In reading the story, you start to read each paragraph, and let's say they contain 2 sentences each. You're studying them and you're realizing that the first sentence of every paragraph kind of reminds you of your favorite Simpsons episodes. And the second sentence of every paragraph, well, that seems to make reference to an object that a doctor from the Doctor Who series always contain. You know, like the 11th Doctor has a fez, I think the fourth Doctor has a scarf, that kind of thing. You start to put those things together. So, once you've made that connection, that little aha moment, you sort the paragraphs in order of the air date of each Simpsons episode you identify. What causes you to do this? Who knows? You're just trying things out, let's say. Then what you do is something called indexing, right? So if you have an episode of The Simpsons and a doctor from Doctor Who, let's say one of the sentences mentions a fez. Hey, well, the fez was worn by the 11th Doctor. That number 11, let's find the 11th letter in the sentence. If you do that with all of the paragraphs, you realize you're spelling out the word Sullivan, which is your answer. That is an example of a basic puzzle hunt puzzle. You can see that it's much more obscure. If you don't know The Simpsons, if you don't know Doctor Who, you are out of luck. And that is another reason why some are you describing something as some kind of punishment? Yes, both to both of those. Um, yeah, you're out of luck, right? Indexing, if you don't know what indexing is, I didn't know what indexing was for the longest time, and it would just infuriate me when I'm trying to solve a puzzle and somebody would ask me, "Oh, did you try indexing?" And I'm like, "I don't know what that is." Um, but I finally learned it. Yeah, that's like the first step in most puzzle hunts now is like you try and index to like either like a certain word or a certain letter within a sentence and solve the puzzle that way. But you can see the multiple layers that are involved. And for that reason, it's important to note, again, that puzzle hunts are often played in teams. And that leads me to kind of my next point, which is when you do a puzzle hunt, when you are designing a puzzle, you have to think about your audience as well. Again, escape rooms, your audience is the mainstream, right? They want, your everyday person to come in and have some fun. And so for that reason, that's the other reason that escape room puzzles are on the easier side. That doesn't speak to anybody's intelligence, by the way. It's simply their experience level. It's simply that they haven't been exposed to that many puzzle types. When I play an escape room, I I get told like, "Oh, you must be so smart playing escape rooms. You recognize that right away." No, I'm not any smarter or stupider than anyone else. It's simply because I have seen that same puzzle 200 times before this. Um, so yeah, that's something to keep in mind, right? And I always tell people to, and they're like, "We're gonna make a game for you, the enthusiasts." I'm like, "Don't do that. That's how you go out of business. Don't frustrate your players." Video games can vary greatly, right? Your audience depends on the game you have. Party games, for example, again, more to the mainstream. They're quick plays, they're fun, they give those quick dopamine hits. Whereas indie games are more for video game enthusiasts who are looking for something new, right? That's where you get more experimental. That's where you get like more out there with the games. There's bolder choices made, so you really do have to consider your audience when designing your puzzles. And puzzle hunts are for typically mid-level to expert puzzle solvers, and it has to be done in teams. Usually it's played in teams. There is the occasional person who will do a solo puzzle hunt, who will solve a puzzle hunt solo, and they are a genius. They are few and far between. That Doctor Who Simpsons example, for instance, the more people you have on your team, the more likely it is that at least somebody will get it. If you have you want different brains in the room with you, because different people think differently and thus are more likely to come to a solution for the puzzle. Um, Even in escape rooms, we always say if you get a bunch of people who think the same way, it's way less likely that that escape room will be solved. And in that last example, I would probably get my friends Rags and Tricky to be on my team because they would instantly get these Simpsons and Doctor Who references. Okay, what do I have next? So, puzzle hunts. There's a lot of them out there. If you are interested in puzzle hunts, this is my quick little mention. The most famous of which is the MIT Mystery Hunt. That is the big heavy hitter of a puzzle hunt. It takes place on the MIT campus. You do have to be a student to be. Teams are made up of. This is what I was talking about. Like they could be 100 people large, and not all of those people might be used over the weekend. I think it's about 183 puzzles or so that has to get solved. It's also the puzzle hunt that has the worst prize, because your prize is that you design the next year's puzzle hunt, and it's this massive job to do. Um, and but yeah, they will get people on their teams who they just think, you know what, Amanda, I think I have a feeling that there might be a blueprints puzzle somewhere in there. We get a feeling that there's going to be that kind of a theme. If you could just be on hand in case we need a blueprints trivia or something like that, that would be great. Right? That's it. Like they just get as many experts in as many fields as possible to cover themselves. It's an epic hunt. There's also the Galactic Puzzle Hunt, which kind of follows the same little route. And then there's the Cryptex Hunt. Now, the Cryptex Hunt, this is a little bit biased, a little bit of shameless self promotion. It is considered a beginner puzzle hunt, and it is often, not always, but designed by my friend Errol. He's the one who started it, but different puzzle designer leads have come in over the years. And basically, every year there's a theme. It takes place over the course of a week. It's a great time, and it's considered a good intro into puzzle hunts. If you want to try one, by the way, I'm going to quickly mention this. For example, the one that I was most heavily involved in was the 2021 Cryptex Hunt, and we made a series. I think we made 9 text-based pixel art adventure games, which do play out as a legit game, but embedded in each of those games is a secret puzzle, and that secret puzzle is the actual puzzle hunt puzzle. And when you solve all of those, you then go to the meta puzzle, as it's called. Um, the one that you see there is the one designed by me. It's called the Red Soldier. If you know me and you play it, you will know that I have a type. Definitely, I am very transparent with what my interests are. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one, and the puzzle designer Dan. Uh, Sorry, I think I'm getting some echo in my head from the the kanji side. Sorry, it's just a bit distracting, Lindsay. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, sorry, I just had to stop. I wish I could talk over my own voice, but I alas, I cannot. Alright. Okay, how long have I been talking? Cool. Let's stop talking about puzzle hunts in general. Let's start comparing now. What does this have to do with blueprints? So when we think about a puzzle hunt, it actually has a lot in common with blueprints. Um, for one, your audience, right? Both are kind of tailored to enthusiasts. However, video game enthusiasts are not the same as expert puzzle hunters, which I did a spelling mistake there. Sorry, Lindsay, I can't, is everything okay? Okay. Um, in both blueprints and, puzzle hunts, the puzzles can be unnecessary can be rather, complex, especially later in the game in blueprints. Both puzzles Blueprints has some insanely layered puzzles, and we will get into the good and the bad part of that later, but yes, blueprints can have some insanely complex puzzles, which very much reminded me of puzzle hunts. That example I showed you earlier, that very much applies to blueprints, especially the later game puzzles, where you really have to sit there and think and try and just try random stuff that you don't even know is going to work or not. And even when you solve it, you might realize that it's not the first solve. It's not the actual solution to the puzzle. You've simply solved a layer of the puzzle. Notes are absolutely necessary in both blueprints and puzzle hunts. Uh, Unlike other puzzle games, which we'll get to, which kind of keep track of things for you in the game, Blueprints does no such thing. You are responsible for figuring out what's important, what should be taken note of, and what can be used. Um, Unlike puzzle hunts, so with puzzle hunts, obviously, because they're competitive, there's no hinting until after the puzzle hunt is over. There's sometimes they'll make them available after the fact and provide hints for you. With blueprints, there is hinting available for most of the puzzles in the game, believe it or not. Even ones that you might be thinking, "Oh, except this one." No, 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 no. If you are patient enough, and we'll get to that, you will be provided a clue for a puzzle. However, they are often very late into the game. And here's where I really drew the comparison with puzzle hunts and blueprints. Blueprints and puzzle hunts are best solved in teams, and we will get to that. With blueprints, at least one other person is the most beneficial way to play this game. So before I get into the constructive criticism portion of this game, let's talk about what blueprints does get right. I'm sorry, I'm reading Clay's comment and it's funny. Because it's very on point. The prince part does come into it as well, but yes, Blue Prince is a pun. It's because he's a sad prince. So, what does Blue Prince get right? First of all, the discovery, the exploration. Oh my gosh. There is so many areas that you could explore in blueprints, so many details to take in. And all of those areas as well have things in them that are hiding in plain sight. There is always something in blueprints that you thought you knew a lot about that suddenly takes on a new meaning later in the game. And that just gives me such a joy when I discover that. It's also great at teasing locations that you cannot yet get to. So these are also known as gatekeepings. Like so, when your puzzle or area there's is has a gatekeeper to it. It's teasing that you can get to that eventually is really important. It gives the player motivation. It gives them a goal to work toward. Very early in the game, on the left hand side here, you will see what's known as the antechamber. This isn't too much of a spoiler because it lets you know that this exists pretty early in the game. When you first see this image, you have no idea what you're looking at. You have no idea what's going on, but you do know that, oh, is this where I get to? Oh, this is an area that I can't get to, but maybe I can eventually get access to it. Is this what I have to find? And so from there, you can't see it here, but this image is basically one of those doors will open and you realize you have to somehow make your way up there and you have no idea what you're going to find when you get up there. So that sense of mystery, that sense of motivation really pushes you forward to try and find this room. It helps to give you a goal, and Blueprints has that all throughout its game, and I really do praise it for that. The other thing that it does very well, and I could do a whole other presentation on this, is the lore. The story of this game is fantastic. First, it is a rich and detailed story. It's not the most complicated story you're ever going to find. It's not the most complicated world you are ever going to find, but it is very much a realized world, and a lot of work was clearly put into it. The world has a great history to it. The characters are fleshed out and three dimensional. Um, you get to know all of them. You get to know the motivations of these characters, who they are, why they do what they do, why they did what they did if they have since passed away. More importantly, though, the lore that you learn is necessary to solving these puzzles. This is not just flavor text. This is not Baldur's Gate where you find a million books and never read them. Um, you need to learn the lore of this game. My friend Errol, who is a puzzle designer, and who does love video games as well, has not yet finished Blueprints, but was playing it and couldn't help but comment on the fact that he was learning all of the history, all of the narrative, and it was sticking in his head. And that's very much, if you know Errol, you know that it's not that he doesn't like narrative in games, but he'll often just skip it, right? He'll like it's not necessary to his goal. He's gonna just skip all the dialogue and he's going to like move on to his next puzzle or whatever. With Blueprints, not so much. In order to solve these puzzles, you need to learn the history of this world. You need to learn who these characters are. You need to study in school. Like literally in the game, there is a school that you need to do and do research and take note of things, and it starts to stick. If you don't, the puzzles are going to be a lot more. They're going to be a lot more challenging. I didn't mention it before, um, but this is a great example as well of a tip of the iceberg game narrative, because what we are seeing is likely, I can't confirm this, but is likely very surface level, and the rest of the iceberg, all of the work that the designers put into this narrative, into this lore, a lot of it we definitely benefit from it, but we don't see it outright, right? We don't probably see all the research and the notes and things that we made in there. What we do see is that it's now embedded into the environment. You walk into a room, you should get to know whose room that is, right? There's little details throughout the game that don't spell things out for you, but allude to things enough that you can put context clues together, and I love that about the game. It has some great environmental storytelling. Yes, there are still journals. Yes, there are still letters to read and everything, which do spell things out for you a little bit, but I still, even with the letters, like, they don't say all the details. What I love about the letters in this game is that they're not necessarily expository. People are talking to each other like the other person knows what they're talking about. That's how letters and conversations normally work. So yeah, the lore, fantastic. I could go on and on about it, but I am looking at time. The puzzles as well, I'm going to say right here before I switch the slides, I do really enjoy the puzzles of Blueprints. I think they work. Where Blueprints has some challenges, I feel, for better and for worse, is in its pacing. So, the puzzles in Blueprints, I hear like that was a poorly designed puzzle. It's not necessarily a poorly designed puzzle. It might be, though, how it's paced out in the game that is very challenging. So, this is the first issue that I have with the puzzles, which is that many of the late game puzzles and blueprints are actually introduced fairly early. They're teased, which is great, but there's no good way when people discover puzzles and blueprints, and most of them are obvious. Most of the puzzles and blueprints, they're a puzzle when you look at them. Um, but there isn't really a good way to tell if you are lacking more information, if you need to gather more information, or if you are simply just not getting something. Like I was saying, Blueprints is heavy into the aha puzzles. And aha puzzles, sometimes it's simply like your brain simply doesn't think that way. You need to think at it from another angle, or you need to approach it from another direction. And if you're just not getting it, then you might just not get it. So, but that's not to say that maybe you're just not missing some information. Maybe there's a clue somewhere that will push you in the right direction. There's no really good way to tell that in Blueprints. Clues do arrive but often far later in the game. So it is possible to, solve a puzzle and then get a clue for it hours later and then think, "Oh, that would have been nice to have." Um, because these clues are arriving a lot later, players are at risk of solving the puzzle very early, either by luck or by accident. Now, there's a few ways that we can solve puzzles in not just the blueprints and everything, but in everything. Um, One of those ways, so in blueprints, I found that there was like four basic ways of solving, and again, this could be applied to a few things. Um, the first way is obviously the intended way, the way that the puzzle designer expects or wants you to solve it, right? You follow their rules, you gather the clues, you put them together, and you solve it at the right time. Perfect. Wonderful, but we don't always operate in that world. There's also something called back solving. This is when you recognize a pattern to your answers. Maybe you're solving a series of answers and you're realizing, hey, these answers all have something in common. So maybe you make a kind of an educated guess for the next puzzle and you're right. Like maybe you realize, hey, these puzzles always seem to involve the letters for the four cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. Well, maybe I'll just try something like that next time and it'll work. You don't know how the actual way to solve it was, but you recognize the pattern and then later you'll go back and figure out how you should have solved it. That's back solving. Um Back solving, looking at you, laser eyes. Lorelei and the laser eyes is a fantastic example of using back solving. I was playing it with Dan the other day, Dan the Video Ninja the other day, and very much so. Once you realize a certain pattern in Lorelei, you can kind of surmise what some of the answers will be to the puzzles. Back solving also happens in blueprints. I'm not going to say where, I'm not going to say how, but there is a series of safes in blueprints that do all tend to follow a pattern. Um, Once you realize what that pattern is, it's not necessarily you're going to immediately get the answer, but you kind of know what you're solving too. And so you'll start to look for those patterns. Then there's brute forcing. This is when impatient wins through, and this does sometimes happen with me. You will find on my streams, and you just start throwing solutions into an answer key. Like three combo locks, very easy to brute force if you are getting frustrated in an escape room, for example. Um, Other things like if you know two of the numbers in a combination and you're still missing the last two, just brute force it. Just I don't want to do this puzzle anymore. I'm just gonna brute it. uh Valid way to solve puzzles, but not the most satisfying way. um and then, of course, by accident. Maybe you've stumbled upon a puzzle and you're just kind of fiddling around with it just to see what it's like, and suddenly you just kind of it just gets solved. Suddenly, you kind of just stumble into the answer. You don't actually really do any solving, it just kind of gets solved, and you're like, "Oh, was that supposed to happen yet?" This can happen a lot in blueprints. This one is very risky to happen, especially in the very non-linear way that you play. The clue for that might come way later in the game, and so this is where the pacing issue comes up. Because if you have accidentally solved a puzzle early on, or you brute forced it, or you somehow had a thought and it somehow worked, when you are solving another puzzle later and your answer to that puzzle is to get a clue to a puzzle you've already solved, that is deeply disappointing. And so for a few of the puzzles and blueprints, I was kind of like, "Ah, if I had just been a bit more patient, if I had just been a bit more like, you know, uh like if I just waited a little bit, I would have gotten the clue necessary to solve this puzzle and I wouldn't be sitting here with this feeling of sadness and disappointment that, I have a clue for a puzzle that I can't do anymore." Yeah, Nick and I had a drink your Ovaltine a lot, memes during playing Blueprints. The other thing that Blueprints has an issue with is the difficulty curve, so this is where the audience part comes in. Blueprints initially seems like a game for your average video game enthusiast, and they might, be good at solving puzzles in games and stuff, but how the difficulty ramps up in the game is a little bit wacky, I will admit. these challenging aha puzzles, like I was saying, it means you either you get it or you don't. And going back to the pacing issue, the beginning of the game very much starts out, or we'll get to this, but like the quick dopamine hits you get at the beginning of the game quickly diminish as the game goes on. There are two major and if you were to end after that first point, you'll get a credit sequence. You could end the game there and it would be perfectly fine. You would have a complete-ish experience, but there'd be a whole bunch of mysteries you haven't solved yet. So naturally you want to keep playing, but the puzzles tend to ramp up in difficulty. And as a result, the game can kind of feel like it's stalling, right? You're gonna spend longer and longer periods where nothing seems to be happening, nothing is getting solved. Some of that is solved by the mechanics. You can, the RNG element or the random number generator element where you're building this house and it's randomly generating. You can work at improving your odds, you can work at getting achievements, and sometimes in doing that, you unlock a weird clue you hadn't expected to unlock, or sometimes in doing that, when you're just thinking to yourself, an answer will pop into your head and you'll run off and solve the puzzle. But those moments get fewer and far between. And here's it in practice. Okay, so let's look at a normal puzzle curve here. This puzzle curve, this is kind of, if you've studied narrative, if you've studied in school, when you learn about the hero's journey, when you learn about, if anyone who's taken a writing course might recognize the shape of this curve. This is actually kind of matching the narrative curve, right? You have your exposition, your inciting action, your rising and falling actions, resulting in a climax, then falling into a denouement and a falling action. Puzzles take the same kind of thing. The curve of the difficulty of a puzzle is very much tied to the curve of tension in the game as well. Puzzle difficulty is simply a rising and a falling of tension, or a building and a release of tension. Um, you start the game with your easiest puzzle. That's the hook. You train your players. They get a nice, easy task to do. It trains them on what to do. It gets them excited for the game. It motivates them to move forward. It gives them a goal to work toward. That's the first one. And then your puzzles start to ramp up in difficulty, right? Ramp up in complexity. Um, as they do that, every time you solve a puzzle, like the tension builds as you're solving it. When you solve it, dopamine hit, release, relief. You're motivated to move on to the next level of difficulty. All of this culminates in the climax, the toughest puzzle of the game, the brain buster, the one where you are just racking your brain trying to figure out what it is. And when you do, it's such a good feeling. But the most difficult puzzle in your game uh, should not be the final puzzle. The final puzzle should actually be something slightly easier, which propels the player forward to the end of the game, lets them ride that emotional high, and lets you release that tension in a proper way. Early escape rooms, especially, really struggled with this because they would end at the climax and people would come out and they wouldn't know what to do with their emotions. Like, imagine you're solving the most difficult puzzle, you solved it, yes, what next? And it's just somebody telling you, "Congrats." Right? You need something more than that. You need, like, a final little task to do to kinda drive it home. Blueprints, on the other hand, tends to follow the puzzle hunt curve of things, which is, it just kinda keeps getting more difficult. And, exponentially more difficult, in fact. And you can see it very much starts out quick, right? You find a puzzle, you solve it. The end is never the end, is never the end. And yeah, like as you can see there, it just keeps going. And that can lead to some extreme puzzle fatigue because not only are things getting more difficult, you don't get a sense of when it's going to end. You don't get a sense of when does this stop. When I was talking about it with my friends, we'd always hear that there's a lot of game in this game. I don't know if this is the final puzzle or not. I think I took it about as far as it could go. I was very proud of myself. The very final puzzle in Blueprints, at least what is the known final puzzle in Blueprints, I took the time, I solved it on my own. I felt very happy about it, but it still left me kind of feeling like, "Oh." That's it. There really wasn't a definitive end, and again, it kinda just ramps up in difficulty, and I still wasn't sure if it was the end. I wondered if there was another puzzle beyond that. Often in blueprints, your reward for solving a puzzle is another puzzle or another layer to the puzzle, and yeah, what that results in is some exhaustion and fatigue. So that is a thing. I'm just taking a look at time here. Let's keep going. Um Also, expectations, right? The expectation that Blueprints sets at the start is not what you end up with, right? It sets out to be a somewhat simple puzzle game with mostly like weighing on the RNG elements and being very narrative heavy. The narrative heavy and the RNG elements stay. The puzzle aspect, though, ramps up considerably. So when you're considering your audience, if you have your average gaming enthusiast coming in to solve this, those puzzles, they're tough, man. They are incredibly tough. And, if you're playing it alone especially, and suddenly you're feeling stupid, that's not a great way to feel in a game. So I, totally understand why some people, decided to just kind of stop playing after a bit because, the audience suddenly shifts. You need kind of people who are more used to puzzles in games or even puzzle hunt puzzles to solve some of these things. And I do not blame people if you wanna go to hints and stuff, by all means do so. If it gets you to the end of the game and you feel good about finishing the game, do it. Don't deny yourself hints if it's going to come at the cost of your happiness. Um, all right. Finally, to that point, because of that ramp up in difficulty and everything, that's when I realized you gotta play blueprints in a team. You need more brains in the room. Different brains think differently. When I was watching, and are more likely to solve the puzzles, when I was watching my friends play, I was observing some things. For one thing, there would always be kind of a navigator role, the person who was actually playing the game and navigating around the space in the game. And then there would be an observer or a note taker who would be simply watching them or taking notes on things, and that observer would often notice things that the navigator wouldn't. And this is for multiple friends playing it, because the navigator, they're focused on, oh, okay, I got to get to that door, and they're not necessarily taking in the entire environment around them, whereas the observer is. So they were able to notice certain things. The other thing I noticed that, hearing them talk their ideas back and forth out loud would much more frequently, mean they would stumble upon the correct answer. There were moments, and I had to stop myself from screaming, where somebody would say the correct answer and then be like, "Nah, that couldn't be it." And I'm like, "Just try it. Just try. Okay, okay." But more often than not, hearing them banter back and forth, trading ideas, sharing those ideas, that's how puzzle hunts work too. You gotta try things, and so more often than not, that was a more effective way of solving blueprints puzzles than me sitting here staring at the screen, wondering where I'm going wrong. It also meant that you could split up tasks. So the observer might be looking over their notes while the navigator interacted with the video game space. And this helped to multitask in a way because it made the solving process more efficient. While the person's looking at their notes and looking at things, so for example, while the observer is looking over the notes that they've just made, and trying to think of theories, they might throw a theory out there which the navigator will then take action on while they are thinking up other theories. And so the navigator might be like, "Oh, what did you just say? Did you say this word? Okay, I'm going to try this word in this lock while think of other things." And that really helped to speed up the solving process as well. It also makes for a better streaming experience, right? I didn't stream Blueprints because I'm like, yeah, it's just going to be me sitting there thinking, but having two people solving it, yes, much easier for streaming. Okay, we're getting to the end of this. Look at that! I timed things! So regardless of what you there's a lot of opinions on Blueprints. It is a kind of divisive game. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, whether you're like, "Ah, it was fine." Um, I would argue that regardless of what you think, it is a revolutionary game. It really swung for the fences. It tried some interesting new things. Did it always succeed in that? No, but I still am going to mark it probably as one of my favorite games of all time. Um, Fu I mean, the next panel I do will probably be on the narrative of this game, and how it absolutely succeeds and everything, but I really appreciate that Blueprints tried to do something different and tried to try for these very difficult multi-layered puzzles, for better and for worse. Yeah, so I think that I'm hoping that other designers take inspiration from it, that like Myst, we will get other games that improve upon things that this game introduced, and I look forward to definitely what these designers have coming out of the box next. I think they did get, from what I understand, Cyan did work with them a bit on this, so it does make sense. Um, alright, if you have questions. One of the pictures I showed, by the way, that is a good example of an aha puzzle you either get or you don't is the gallery puzzle. Oh, believe it or not, there is a hint for that room, that you do get way later in the game, but that is a beast of a room, and it is very much a if you don't think this way, you're not gonna get it. So if anyone has any comments, people have been making things throughout. Gallery is on the critical path, yes, it is. You do need to solve it. You do need to solve it, but getting the hint for that you get a hint, um, you do get a hint for that game, or that puzzle, but again, it's a hint. And it mostly kinda just points you in a general direction, but again, doesn't really solve it. You still have to make that aha, that leap as to what those stupid paintings are saying. Yeah. Where do you find the BFG? Yeah, question, where do you find the B in your heart, Dan, it's always in your heart. Yes, Clay, the protagonist of the first Mist is Captain Kirk. Oh, that's a good okay, we have an actual question. What other games are like Blueprints? So I mentioned it earlier, but I would recommend for a recent one, Lorelei and the Blue and the Laser have blue in my head. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a great game, another great puzzle game, and the benefit of that one, and I forgot to mention it during the presentation, is that unlike Blueprints, it keeps track of the hints that you find throughout the game. Whenever you interact with an object, you can be guaranteed that Lorelei and the Laser Eyes will keep note of it and that you can refer back to it later. You don't have to go and find it again, which is a very, very nice feature of a puzzle game. Um, Other games that kind of follow the blueprints think, you know what? The Room series is a good, quick dopamine hit puzzle game. They're kind of creepy, but they're only ever creepy. They're rarely jump scary. Um, any recommendations for a beginner friendly puzzle game? That's a good question. I'm like, "Ah, I gotta open up the Steam library." Beginner friendly. You know what? I would say rather than, like, to kind of introduce yourself to it and everything, like, any of the escape game puzzles out there. I'm trying to think. Do you know what? Playing Escape Room Simulator, that's a great intro to some puzzle games, right? If you whether they just came out with Escape Room Simulator 2 as well, and those are fun and they can be played with friends as well. So the Escape Room Simulator games are kind of fun. Uh, like, of course, I'm going blank now on some of the great puzzle games that are out there. Um, you know yeah, I think I will, yeah. Grim Fandango, if you want a good inventory puzzle game, yep, Grim Fandango is a good one. That's a very classic point and click adventure game. But any of the Portal games, for example, Portal, the Talos Principle, that is kind of a mind-bending one, but that's a good example of, like, gives you that kind of brain satisfaction without being too aha heavy. The Sam& Max games now, when I say puzzle game, those are very much inventory puzzle games, but yes, the Sam& Max games are excellent as well. Those are where you have to use objects, right? So any game like that where point and click adventure games are great for that. I think there's another one, Unavowed. Play Unavowed. That is such a great game, and it's a bit more modern. Obra Dinn. Yes, how could I forget Obra Dinn? Play Obra Dinn. That is a great that is probably the most entertaining giant logic puzzle I have ever played in my life. That is also up there as one of my favorite games of all time. I have played it 3 times now. Yeah, Oberdin was really good. Um, especially if it gets your brain going. Great use of observation as well, and it's a very chill game. There's no time limit, there's nothing like that. It's about you taking in the environment details and exploring and piecing together a story. Um, thank you. So I'm going to wrap it up there. But yes, I will post in the Discord later some more traditional puzzle games. A lot of what's been said here is like a kind of adventure point and click games, which are more inventory based games, which I wouldn't say is like blueprints. So in terms of getting things that are like blueprints, I will compile those later. But thank you everybody very much for being such a great and responsive audience.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Round of applause, everyone in the chat. That was excellent. I'm sure everyone's going to be pinging you in the Discord to get suggestions for you for